Professor Brian Kennedy.
We'll be able to add 10 or 15 years of healthy living to everybody's lives, hopefully. There's a friend I know, who will go nameless, who did some testing recently and vitamin B levels were like 25 times too high. How do we get to this point? High glucose is not a disease. It's maybe a feature of aging.
That you see that people who don't take anything at all, they're borderline to get sick. And then for those who quite healthy already and take no pills at all, compared to the group that are on the pills already.
Mark Twain said that be careful about reading health books because you might die of a misprint.
Especially how the longevity science going to be in the future in the next 10 to 20 years. Sawadee Welcome to our Vitallife Live Talk. I'm Dr. Fa Waniput Sanpasit-Wong and I will be your host for today. Since today is our first episode and I'm very, very excited because we're going to have our special guest with us. Today, please welcome Professor Brian Kennedy. He is the Distinguished Professor of Biochemistry and Physiology at National University of Singapore, and he also is the Director of Center for Healthy Longevity at National University Health System. Most importantly, he is also our scientific advisor at Vitallife and Bumrungrad International Hospital. Please welcome Dr. Brian Kennedy. Hello, Dr. Brian Kennedy. Thank you for being with us here today.
It's my pleasure. Always happy to be here.
Yes. So is this first time in Bangkok for you?
No, this must be about 25 times in Bangkok for me. So I'm a professional now by this point.
Professional travelers. Almost Bangkokians because they're 25th time in Bangkok right now. And why do you love Bangkok?
I like it because it's just it's a friendly place. I always feel like people are very nice and friendly here. Great food, and I travel all the time, so I'm looking for some place I can work and exercise, and more or less I can do that here. The traffic's not the best, but otherwise I really like the city. So.
I see, and thank you so much for being here with us. And I think that's why one of the reasons is we are very lucky to have you as one of our scientific advisor in the board. And we all know that you are spend all of your life doing research in the biology field. So based on your expertise and experience, do you think what is the biggest breakthrough in longevity research right now and why people should care about it?
Well, I think that it's hard to pick one thing, but I think one thing that's really important is it's becoming possible to measure aging. And we'll talk about this maybe later, but the idea that you can know how you're aging is so critically important because once you have that information in hand, it's much easier to act on it. And there's so many supplements and drugs and other kinds of interventions that are being developed that have the potential to really slow down aging and reverse aspects of aging that, I think, in a reasonably short amount of time, we'll be able to add 10 or 15 years of healthy living to everybody's lives, hopefully.
I see. So if based on your opinion right now, some people sometimes mention that the maximum lifespan of humans should be around maybe 120 or 150 years old, based on your opinion. How long do you think people or humans, Homo sapiens, can live?
Well, that's a challenging question because with the global leadership right now, we may not live much longer.
But I agree with that one. So lucky that both of us not the global leaders. Yes.
Yeah, that's probably true. Probably don't want me running things either. I think that it's a difficult question for the following reason. I'm very confident we'll increase the median lifespan of the population. I think that we'll get more people closer to 120. And that's a huge victory. I mean, how much would you pay for 10 extra years of health in your life? How much money do we save by having people healthy longer? They can work longer. They can be active in society. They don't have healthcare costs are lower. So 10 years of extra health span is a revolution. Okay. But the question of whether any of the interventions we're doing now will extend maximum lifespan, I don't think there's consensus on that in the aging field right now. Certainly in animal models, we can extend maximum lifespan. But the data in humans is limited right now, and it's difficult to interpret. So I'm not sure whether what we're going to end up doing is squaring the curve so that more people get to the maximum, but the maximum doesn't change much. or we're actually going to push the curve out and we will have people living 150 or 200 years. I hope I'm alive to find out.
So let's see. So we're going to live day by day. If we still keep breathing, we're still living.
Well, I think there's an element of importance to what you're saying. And that's, it's easier for some people than others, I realize. But living in the moment is so important. Don't live now so that you'll be happy 30 years now. You have to find a way that you're happy now and are maximizing your health 30 years from now. And so lifestyle changes have to be something you can adopt, incorporate, and enjoy in your life. You can't, if it's pure sacrifice, you're not going to do it for that long. So how to change people's behavior is really important question. We know stress, sleep, exercise, nutrition all affect aging. Healthy approaches are good on all of those areas, but getting people to change is difficult. And so I think you have to look for incremental changes in your life. Find a few things you're doing. I'm trying to change my diet right now, for instance. I'm not doing everything at once. I'm trying to get a little bit healthier with each decision. And my tastes are changing over time too. So I'm more comfortable with what I'm changing in my diet. So I think that those are the kinds of ways to change your behavior. You can't just going all in is difficult.
No, I agree. Because when we talk about lifestyle, about behavior, sometimes we live our life not only by scientific data. We are not like pure data-driven beings, but we also live by emotions also. So I think that's why it's very challenging. So when you talk about the lifestyle part, and earlier you also mentioned about the new interventions that are in the research phase. So if you can advise our audience right now that like which pillar of lifestyle that you mentioned, if they have to choose one, like what to start now, which pillar of lifestyle, like among exercise, about diet, about sleep, about stress, or about avoiding like a substance, like stop smoking, which pillar you think that based on the research show that, okay, if you start with this one, it's going to give like the huge impact to your health?
It's really a question that only has personal answers. If somebody has a real smoking problem, they should probably start there, or if they have excessive alcohol intake, they should start there, or drug abuse, So I think that you have to try to, ideally what you do is you figure out what's the most important challenge for you and start with that and try to start dealing with that. When you talk about sleep, that sounds easy, but it's actually pretty hard for people to manage. And I think there are apps now like Whoop that I'm wearing. I don't work for them. I'm just
I wear Aura.
But the Aura is another one that are doing a decent job of measuring your sleep. And so listening to these apps can be helpful in that regard. Stress is also hard to deal with. And I think mindfulness is a big factor there, because when I see people, it's people I know that they're stressed. I can see it, but they don't. This is their normal behavior. They're not recognizing it in themselves. And I think one thing mindfulness does is it makes you self-aware, so that when you're starting to get stressed, you notice it. And I've learned how to do that. I know when something's going wrong, and when I feel that stress, it's much easier to manage. I think not being aware of it, it's hard to manage.
Nice.
I'm not really answering your question. I'll try to answer it in a minute. Diet is critically important. I'll give you a personal example. I'm always trying to be pretty fit, and I always work out. I exercise. I do resistance training. I do endurance training. I was a little bit heavy. Maybe I'm slightly heavy even still, but it was only when I changed my diet, I lost 10 pounds.
Wow.
And so, if you really want to control weight, I think diet is the way to do it. There's a lot of debate over what's a healthy diet, and that's also somewhat personalized, but certainly lots of green leafy vegetables, limited amounts of red meat and dairy, and limiting processed sugars, I think, are most people would agree on that. And so that's not always easy to do, but it's beneficial. And then I guess I would say maybe the most important is exercise. And that's because lean muscle mass is extremely protective for people. Many different ways. As you're getting older, one of the biggest challenges people face is the likelihood that they fall and break their hip.
Yes.
Muscle mass keeps you from falling, and when you do fall, it protects you. But even beyond that, I think that if you look at people that have obesity, if they have a lot of lean muscle mass, they're generally protected.
Yes.
Not completely, but they're certainly largely
Better,
protected.
yeah. Better.
So anything you can do to build muscle mass is important. And I think this is relevant also because a lot of people are taking these GLP agonists and Ozempic and other things. And if you're overweight, I think they're great drugs. I'm not here to disparage those drugs at all, but they are also associated with loss of lean muscle mass. And so if you're doing that, you should be taking counteractive measures to keep your muscle mass because you don't want to lose that.
And I just went to one event that we have like the workshop with all of the triathlon athletes. And one of the athletes asked me about GLP-1 because he wanted to get things a little bit leaner and whether like he should try the GLP-1. So for me, initially, I answered him that similar to what you say, that it's going to impact his muscle mass. So it's something that he need to trade off. So his training program, his like nutrition need to be like adjust based on whatever he want to intervene into his body. So if this triathlon athlete asks you about whether he should try GLP-1 to getting a little bit leaner, to get rid of the percent of the fat, what would you say?
I would be hesitant to recommend that because these people have low fat content anyway. Yeah. Everybody's talking about these drugs as miracle drugs, and in a sense they are. I mean, if you're overweight, you're at increased risk of getting any disease practically.
Yes, true.
And your lifespan, if you're obese, your lifespan is shortened by about 8 years. So these drugs clearly benefit there. And going from obese back to normal weight, normal fat mass is going to be good for almost everybody. So I'm very supportive of these drugs. Okay. But it's a different question. And, there's studies coming out saying these drugs are protective of cardiovascular disease and dementia and all these other things. But these are mostly in individuals that are overweight that have higher risk of all these things. The question that is unanswered yet is if you take people with normal fat mass, 20% fat mass, or, this triathlete's probably under that, then in that case, is taking these drugs beneficial? Do the benefits outweigh the cost? And so I think it's too early to know that. So I don't recommend that. And I don't recommend taking it for purely aesthetic reasons. And a lot of people are right now. It's like the new Viagra, everybody's taking it off label. And so we'll see. Maybe it really is the wonder drug and it's good for them too, but I don't think there's data to support that yet.
Based at the present, we don't have enough data to support whatever he wants to use.
And I'm not sure suppressing appetite is the best thing long term.
I agree.
Again, it depends. If your risk is high, okay, I get it. But if your body's functioning normally and you don't have any metabolic syndrome or anything, and not sure.
And then another pillars, like apart from the lifestyle, we talk about interventions, maybe with the drug, like repurposing drug or many like new substance, new ingredients like NMN, AKG. So in those categories, which one do you think that has like a most promising data that people should pay attention to?
Well, again, I think we're in a world where nothing's fully validated in this context. I'm not against people doing it. I think people should be educated. I think working with a healthcare professional on this is really important. Because we're in a world of information and some of it's bad actors. And so when you decide which supplement, where to buy the supplement, all of these things are very hard for the average consumer to sort out. So working with a very good longevity clinic is really important because you're working with experts who understand this, and they may not have all the answers, but they at least know what questions to ask. I think that if you want to be on the cutting edge though and try things, I think it's fine. One of the things I think medicine has not done well is we haven't empowered patients. We have situations where doctors say, all right, your cholesterol is high, take some statins, and, but the person's not invested in that. This needs to be like, they need to understand these things. They need to be making their own decisions. Should you do hormone replacement, especially for men? There's upsides and downsides to that. That should be a personal decision, not a doctor decision. And I think that so these supplements and things, yeah, you're on the edge. We're not fully validated. You can wait 5 or 10 years and maybe some of these things will be validated. Or you can try now, but you have to understand that you're in a kind of in the world that's between research and clinical practice. And that's fine. I'm happy when people do that. I'm like my own experimental organism at this point. But it's important to have expert advice to point you in the right direction so that you're not making bad decisions. And, I love alpha ketoglutarate, but I think there's good data on NAD and other things. And some things will work better for some individuals than others for others. I think one challenge is combining them. I don't know how to combine them together yet. I can't even do that in a mouse and get predictable results. So if you're taking 20 supplements, I have no idea what's happening to you. And another thing I've noticed is that a lot of vitamins are in multiple supplements. And so there's a friend I know, who'll go nameless, who did some testing recently, and vitamin B levels were like 25 times too high. Wow. And I'm like, how do we get to this point? Then I looked at all the things that they were taking, and there's vitamin B in this and B complex in that and B complex here. And, they're taking a ton of B complex because they're taking different supplements. So try to pay attention to what you're taking. And if the other thing I would say is measure. If you optimizing vitamins, I think will be great for people, but just taking vitamins without knowing what your vitamin D levels are, what your vitamin B levels are, that may not be good, because some of these vitamins in excess are not good either. Yes. So if you really care and you really want to devote the time and effort to optimizing your health, and you have the resources to do it, don't just measure, and then iterate, so you start on a path taking things, see how your levels change, and then keep iterating as you go forward. And I think that I'm very confident that will be beneficial.
No, I totally agree with that. That's why we always mention for clients or people that want to try something that very, very new, or want to take like multiple supplements. The goal or the key is to keep monitoring. Yes. I totally agree. That's
know thyself.
The key. Yes. Because otherwise, I think very common that we see that people come with the supplements from like over the counter. They have a mini duplication of things, and sometimes even like the other ingredients that not the active supplements also like hidden. Many things that maybe sometimes is very bad for our health. Yes.
And, my colleague, Andrea Meyer, and I had a small role, but mainly her study, we bought 16 brands of NMN.
Yes,
and
I've seen
tested
that one.
how much NMN was in the NMN. 4 of the brands had none.
Wow.
Some of them were expensive. We didn't name names, but because we don't want to spend our lives in court, but some of them were expensive.
I know that one, because the first time that she presented is in Dublin.
The first time she showed it.
In Dublin, and she shows it. But okay, that's going to be the secret for both of us.
A couple of them were good, but there's no way for a consumer to know this, right? So it's that's why, again, having somebody that has a sense of where the good sources of material are is very important.
So another question, gonna a little bit like a reverse back to the one that you mentioned, that right now one of the advance in the longevity field is about how we can measure aging. So the one thing or the one terms that I believe that many people start to see a lot more in media is the term that we call biological age. So what is the difference between biological age and at the present how we can measure it?
I think can answer that question at multiple levels. At the deepest level, we're still debating what biologic age is, but I'll answer it at a level that's probably the field agrees on. So you have a chronologic age, and that's your passport. It's very good at measuring that. But you also probably, if you imagine in your head 5 people that are 50 years old that are in your life, they look different. They're not all aging the same. Some of them look old. Some of them have chronic diseases. Other ones, maybe they're exercising a lot. They look healthy. They don't look like they're 50. You say that all the time when you see somebody. Wow, you look really young.
But maybe because it's from the aesthetic.
You rarely say to
Ages,
somebody,
yes.
"You look really old," but
I agree.
you think it. You just don't say it.
Yes.
Yeah, aesthetics is part of it, but not all of it. It's
Mm.
like body structure, how you walk, how you
Yeah.
move. And so people age at different rates. And it's been very, very difficult to measure that. Recently, there are a lot of different types of what's called biologic clocks that attempt to measure biologic aging. It's a little bit about like the supplement and drug space. Nothing is fully validated. We could argue about which the best clock is. I would say it's the one that hasn't been invented yet. But I do think there's a lot of meaningful information that come from these clocks, and they attempt to measure that rate that you're actually aging. So you might be 50, but your clock says 45, which would suggest you're aging well. Or you might be 55. And I already know what happens when you tell somebody they're biologically older. They tell you that clock's not right. But it's very meaningful. It's meaningful to study populations to figure out how people are aging. Hopefully it's meaningful as endpoints for clinical trials, because we can't give you a supplement and see if you live longer. We need a faster way of measuring that. These clocks could measure that. You reverse your age or something. And then they're also interesting to try to understand mechanistically what's driving aging. And so I think it's been a revolution, not just the development of interventions, but another one has been the development of clocks.
I see. And apart from that, because we know that those clocks still, like you just mentioned, not perfect yet. So the best one is still like not invented yet. So for the people who really want to monitor their health by all of those new intervention, and they want to monitor their biological clock. So apart from the biological clock test, is there anything else that you would recommend them to do?
There's a whole range of clinical parameters that we measure all the time, and they're important, but they're at the interface between aging and disease. High glucose is not a disease. It's maybe a feature of aging, but it also then contributes to disease. So, blood pressure, LDL, HDL, all these things are important to know. You should know your parameters and take action early. If things are out of the normal range, you need to figure out what's going on and take action. That doesn't mean taking a bunch of drugs. It could be like going to the gym more, but you need to take action. And so all of these things are important. And I think there'll be more and more meaningful tests. Cognitive tests are interesting. Functional tests are interesting. The more you know about yourself, though, I believe the more likely you are to be healthy.
So related to that question, can I summarize and say that for the people who want to really know a lot of data about themselves, to know exactly that how they can delay the aging process, apart from all of those tests that coming out, it's also very important for them to keep monitoring those simple blood markers that we always do, red blood cell, cholesterol, blood sugar. And like you just mentioned, that's why sometimes it's not about wait until we have disease.
Don't wait. The best time to start intervening is yesterday, but today's okay too. I think that you really want to be proactive about your health. And if you do that, you'll benefit from it. So.
And I would love for you to share just a glimpse a little bit of your latest research that I think is very, very interesting, that you see that people who don't take anything at all and they're borderline to get sick. And then for those who are quite healthy already and take no pills at all, compared to the group that are on the pills already. So
we've been building our own aging clocks as well. And we built one from clinical chemistries, and it predicts mortality very well, 200 months from the point of measurement. So I think it has an actionable clinical readout. But then we started comparing different populations and historical data sets. And what we found is that you can measure all these clinical markers, like we mentioned, like HbA1c and these things. And you can find people 65 to 75 that everything is in the reference range. So in other words, a doctor would look at this and say, well, there's nothing to do. For your age, you're doing great. Just keep coming back. But then there's a question, how did they get to that optimal range? One set of people are just considered healthy, right? So they're not taking any prescription drugs. And they're just doing pretty well. And they are doing well. Okay. They have lower mortality than the average population. But there's another set of people that are optimized, but they're taking drugs. So at some point along the way, they had high blood pressure or they had high glucose or something.
Cholesterol, yes.
Yeah, cholesterol. And they took a drug for it, and now everything looks optimal. The striking thing is those people are biologically younger and they have lower mortality. They're more likely to be alive 200 months from the time of measurement. So what that I think means is that there are multiple interpretations, one of which I think is we need to be aggressive. Intervene early. Don't wait till you get sick. The further you go along these chronic disease channels, the harder it is to come back. And so once you get really sick, the medicine is great at keeping you alive, but that's sick span. It's not health span anymore.
True.
And so, of course, when I get sick, I want to be treated. Don't get me wrong. Doctors have saved my life a couple times already. But I would rather just not get sick.
And then the next question is about the intervention, about supplements. As you know that right now, all of in the communities, there are too many information from many sorts and platforms. So the people tend to be confused between the real anti-aging one or like how can they like separate or like identify like which one is based on real science and which one is only hype. How they can like separate that.
It's difficult. This is still an emerging science, and there are legitimate arguments about what the healthiest diet is, for instance. So that's one problem that we don't know all the answers to everything yet. I would argue we know enough of the answers that people should be paying attention, but not all of them. And then on top of that, you have people promoting things and doing things that are just not healthy and are producing products that don't have what they say in them, or I think that's even worse. And it's hard to deal with as a consumer. I don't know how you solve that. Sometimes I don't know, without testing, and some of the interventions that, I don't know whether they work or not when people ask me. And, I do a lot of consulting and I tell people that, I'm not the best at knowing things. I'm the best at knowing what I don't know. And that's about as far as you can go at this field right now. You can tell people what you know, what you don't know. But again, this comes back to the point I made earlier. If you're not, in this field, you read the literature, the primary literature and understand it, that's fine. It's you have to be trained to do that. But that means you should go seek advice and get help, because otherwise you might be spending a lot of money and doing the wrong things.
That may be harmful to our health also.
I think Mark Twain said that be careful about reading health books because you might die of a misprint. And a little bit like that. You might be taking the wrong thing, and nobody has all the answers, but experts have some of them and they can help you.
And then for the last questions of today, if you can imagine in the next 10 or 20 years in the future, how would you see our society, or even especially how the longevity science going to be in the future in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, I think that in terms of aging, people will be living longer, being healthy longer. And again, that's how much would you pay for 5 years of health, of 10 years of health? I mean, it's an extremely valuable thing if we can do that. We can slow disease. We can save money on the economy, keeping people healthy. Medical costs are spiraling out of control. The current system's not working. The best way to solve it is keep people from getting sick. So I think that's going to be great going forward. I think there are challenges. How do we democratize interventions so that everybody gets access? That's one of them. But ultimately, we want to make sure this is a instrument of equalization so that everybody gets access and it doesn't further exacerbate the sort of socioeconomic divides that already exist. And so ultimately, I think we need to figure out how to make, how can the middle class get access?
Yes, I agree.
How can everybody get access? How do we develop low-cost solutions to problems? And I don't know that we have the answers to that yet, but we should be mindful of it because, again, we want to be instruments for good.
And so thank you for being here with us today. And I believe that all of our audience going to get a lot of useful information. And hopefully to see you again next time, or maybe see you again when we are both like, or you achieve 100 years old and still like happy and kicking.
That's still a ways away. I'm not that old.
Yes. Okay.
No, but I'm happy to come anytime. And the biggest challenge is when I come here, getting me to leave, not getting me to come back. So.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thanks a
Ram.
lot.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. I believe all of you already get an insightful and fruitful information that's gonna help all of you lead a healthier and longer life. If you like this episode, please click like and share. And if you have any comments, any queries, please feel free to leave comment below. We definitely gonna answer your question and your queries. So see you next time. Please subscribe.